Welcome back to Dirty Boots Capital, folks. Today we got the amazing Don Rainwater with us. Don, thank you for joining us, and I'll do a little brief info of Don. I met Don at a conference a few weeks back, and he is the Libertarian Party candidate for governor of Indiana, which is a pretty big friggin' deal. Super excited to have you here with us, Don. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it and really appreciate the opportunity to reach out and talk to your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, we're both big on the whole freedom and liberty movement, and there's so much. How can I say there's so much craziness on both sides of the aisle. Democrats, Republicans. Wow, I'm sure we could talk hours for that. And at the conference, we
Absolutely.
we we did talk quite a bit. But one of the things I like to understand is what is your why for getting into this, right? This is somewhat of a thankless job to be running for governor of Indiana. What is your why for getting into that?
To really kind of give you the short version, because like you said, we could sit here for hours and talk about the why. But the short version is I have children and grandchildren, and the Indiana that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. And the concept of small government that I grew up with no longer exists. People in Indiana brag about how low our taxes are, yet our taxes are going up every year. Our state budget, the spending in the state of Indiana by a supermajority Republican legislature has increased from 2019 to 2024 by over $10 billion in general fund spending. And when you add the federal government money, which isn't the federal government's money, it's
Our
yours and
money.
mine, they took from us. But when you add that in, the spending has gone up $20 billion in the last 5 years. And that's not small government to me. I want my grandchildren and my grandchildren's grandchildren to live in a liberty society, not a socialist society that has liberty tattooed on its forehead.
Yeah, and it's so funny because we spoke about that. We resonate, you and I, so much about that. For ourselves, we could do nothing until the time we die, and we'll be okay. We'll get our retirement checks. We'll get, we already have our house. We have our things. We'll be okay. But guys like you and me, and there's others out there, we're doing this for the next generation. We got
Absolutely.
very, very little to profit, if anything, from this. Most of what I do on this front, it's at my cost, right? Same
Right.
as running for a governor, right? For a big state like Indiana, a lot of that is on you, and fundraising and a lot of time and energy on your front. This is all for the next generation.
Well, and not really just all that, Tony, but to be very honest with you, and I hope I don't offend anybody when I
No,
say this, when I read my Bible, it said Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." So I feel an obligation to fight for not only my individual rights, but the rights of my neighbor. And I believe that my neighbor is everybody. So I've got 6.7 million neighbors in Indiana that somebody needs to stand up for their individual rights. And when the Republicans won't do it and the Democrats don't do it, somebody's got to do it. And that's why I'm a libertarian, because somebody has to stand up for the individual. We live in a society today that is predominantly, I hate to say it, corporatist.
yeah.
You hear people talk about guarding against communism. And I was in the Navy for 8 years. I understand firsthand the threat of, the Cold War. I was in the Navy in the 80s when there still was a Cold War.
Going on, yeah.
And so, I understand standing up against communism, and I certainly understand standing up against socialism. But what we have failed to do in our country today and in the state of Indiana is we don't stand up against corporatism. And we are allowing large public corporations to take over the governing of our state and of our nation instead of safeguarding individual rights. I'm sure you've heard, and your viewers have probably heard the old joke about, democracy is two wolves and a sheep arguing over what's for lunch. I don't want to be in a democracy. I want to be in a republic where my individual rights are safeguarded. Everybody else thinks that I should give all of my paycheck to the greater good. I mean, that sounds great, but the reality is when the greater good is taking care of people that already have more than we have, then it's not the greater good.
Yeah, yeah. I
Sorry,
mean,
I
you,
sometimes I get on a little bit of a roll here. You'll have to just tell me, hey, stop, I have a question
no,
now.
Don. It's that passion that we need, but not the passion to fill our own pockets like you see a lot of these politicians doing. It's the passion to make society better, to make the next generation better, right? To make this a
Right.
better world. That's the passion that I love, that I felt when we spoke, which
Well,
was just,
thank you.
it was a very serendipitous type moment. We just kind of came together and started chatting about this.
Yes.
You didn't know who I was. I didn't know who you were, right? We didn't have any ulterior motive. There was no ulterior motive. It was just two guys talking about the
Right.
world. And one of the things, so I want to transition a little bit more on this corporatism piece. I had mentioned how, like, I'm still, man, there's still smoke coming out of my ears relative to this Chips for America Act that Gina Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, pushed forward. And man, there's so many incentives. Nice
Hmm.
word. Sounds like a nice word, right? There's so many incentives that have been given to these chip manufacturers across many states, Ohio, Texas, Arizona, different places, to be able to build these mega facilities. And so we were having this conversation about how there's a lot of corruption and maybe not really for America because there's some nefarious things going with building these huge mega facilities. They use tons of water, tons of water, and they drain these aquifers underneath these cities.
Hmm.
And you can do this today, but you know what? In 50 years, when those aquifers are bone dry, Gina Raimondo isn't around to solve those problems, right?
Right.
So, there's these nefarious things that people aren't talking about that's going to impact Americans 50 years from now. And
Right.
so you had mentioned to me something that's going on with Meta in Indiana. If you can bring us up to speed
Yeah.
what that's all about.
Absolutely, but real quick, you bring up the aquifers and the redistribution of water, if you will.
Yeah.
We have that going on in Indiana, but it's all homegrown. If you've heard of Eli Lilly,
Hmm.
large pharmaceutical
Yeah.
corporation here in central Indiana, they're building a an industrial park in Lebanon, Indiana, and they need a lot of water there, and they
Hmm.
don't have the water. So they're going to pipe the water down from the Lafayette, Indiana area. You may be familiar with Lafayette if you know anything about Purdue University,
Mm.
which is
Yep.
in West Lafayette. But people in that area, in the Lafayette area, are very concerned because they're going to be tapping into their aquifer, pulling their water down for this industrial park, and they haven't done adequate studies to determine what the impact on the citizens of Tippecanoe County
Yep.
is going to be because they don't care.
Yep.
As long as the corporations get what they need, the people,
Yep.
I'm sure that most of the folks listening or watching have seen the movie The Matrix. And that's really, in a lot of ways, how we're being treated. We're plugged into the system and they're sucking everything out of us and giving it to somebody, but they're not taking care of us. They're just keeping us alive, keeping us dependent. And to that, I will tell you a little bit about the data center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Meta, the parent company for Facebook, has been enticed to build an $800 million data center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. That'll be a pretty big data center. And they were enticed to do it by our Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is a public-private partnership made up of the governor of the state of Indiana, the Secretary of Commerce in Indiana, and then a group of private corporation CEOs
Mm.
who all get together and decide how they're going to bring new corporate investment to Indiana. And so what they did was they gave Meta Corporation a 35-year sales and use tax exemption. For the next 35 years, all of the data center equipment that Meta purchases will be sales tax free. But that's not it. I've been in IT for over 25 years. And anybody that knows anything about a data center knows it uses a lot of electricity to run all those
Yeah.
machines. And Meta is getting a 35-year sales tax exemption on their electric bill. Now, here's the thing that upsets me. During the pandemic, our current governor shut down small businesses in Indiana, told them they couldn't operate. We've lost a bunch of small businesses
Yep.
and we're losing more. And as a matter of fact, the US Chamber of Commerce came out in August of last year with a report that said for every 100 available jobs in Indiana, we only have 72 available workers to fill those 100 jobs. We have a worker shortage in Indiana. And any small business owner, any fast food franchisee, or otherwise small business owner who's trying to staff their business so they can stay open and make a profit so they can earn an income for their family is struggling to staff. But we're bringing new jobs
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Silicon Valley or Japan or China.
And how
Evidently,
many?
the state of Indiana is currently negotiating with numerous Chinese corporations. We have small businesses that are struggling and dying, shutting their doors, and we're investing money and we're giving huge tax breaks to these out of state, out of country corporations to come here, all that tax incentive, and they are only required to create 100 new jobs. But the question is, if you're paying the increased property taxes to support all those tax breaks that Meta's getting, and you already have a job, how do these new jobs help you? And that's the thing that frustrates me. We hear a lot of these politicians today talk about, I'm a job creator. Well, right now we don't need more jobs. What we need is to reduce our taxes, eliminate our state income tax, actually cap our property taxes in a real way. Right now, the assessments go up every year, so the taxes still go up. Instead of incentivizing corporations to come here and giving them huge tax breaks, we should be giving our citizens tax breaks,
Yeah.
reducing our citizens' taxes, encouraging more people to move here, fill those jobs that are going unfilled. But we're not doing that because that's not the corporatist way. And that's what I mean by corporatism. The individual Hoosier, their tax, our gasoline excise tax is going to go up 2 cents April 1st. April Fools. Supermajority Republican legislature, we believe in small government and lower taxes, but we're going to increase that gasoline excise tax again. Everybody wants a piece of that pie. And you and I, you were talking about the fact that why we do this. And the question that I have to ask, we have several people in Indiana running for governor who are millionaires. In a great sense, they're funding their own campaigns
Sure.
with millions of dollars. Now, if you've got millions of dollars, why would you spend millions of dollars for a job that pays about 190 grand a year?
Yeah, just look at history, right? Just look at
There's got,
history for some of these politicians.
yeah,
They go
there's
into
got to be
office.
something
Yeah,
that they're
they go.
getting out of it.
Yeah, and they do.
And
After they get out of office, they go on the speaking trail, and they go speak at banks and institutions and economic summits and different things worldwide. They're known
Well,
as
and while they're in
experts and
office, they peddle influence and they
yep.
manipulate the system to benefit those who will later pay them those big honorariums. It pains me greatly when I see the average citizen who doesn't realize how badly we're being taken advantage of today by the government that is supposed to be safeguarding our individual rights and making sure that we can pursue our destiny without interference.
No, that was great. I appreciate you laying that all down for us. There's definitely a couple of things I want to touch on that. Um, it brings up the fact, it's not a dispute, it's a fact that our education system is so broken that
Oh,
society
absolutely.
society doesn't understand how these things work. And so I'll point out specifically, you talk about them wanting to bring Meta in, offer them these exemptions, these tax
Hmm.
exemptions, these incentives to be able to come in, and the majority of that factory, that new facility is going to be automated. It's not like it's, 50 years ago or even 20 years ago where that facility would bring in thousands of jobs. If they're lucky, they might bring in 100, maybe 150 jobs.
Right.
But for the most part, that is all automated these days to maximize profits, which I understand. 2 years ago, I did a video on why small businesses are dying across this
Hmm.
country. And I did it because I wanted to kind of share that education as to what's really happening out there. When a small business, to one of your points, when a small business cannot hire the staff that they need, that's a problem,
Absolutely.
right?
It's a
And
terrible problem.
so not only do they might not have the staff to do the work that they want to do, now they might also have to pay higher wages, offer
Hmm.
more healthcare type programs, right? These are things that are going to break the back of the small business. And there's a lot of other things going on in there with small businesses, in terms of some societal effects. The younger generation, in many ways, and not to paint with a broad brush, but in many ways, the next generation has seen all the trial and tribulations going on in the world, and they don't want to own a business. They're saying, "Hey, grandpa, hey, dad, mom, I don't want to get into that business. There's too much uncertainty. They can close us down at any point in time. We don't know what's going to happen with inflation. We bid a job at $1,000, but then inflation hits, and by the time we get that job in the pipeline 6 weeks later, now that job is another couple $100 more eating into our profit. How do we bid jobs? How do we a person we thought we had on staff today ended up leaving to go work for another company because they were getting paid now more
Uh-huh.
by this other company. There's so much going on, and
Oh
so the
yeah. And if you just think about that, oh, you mean I have to find health insurance for myself and all of my employees? And it's because, and this is what the one of the foundations of corporatism is the idea that it's easier to go to work for a corporation and let them take care of you.
yeah.
It's the development of dependency.
Hmm.
It's them sticking that cord in the back of your neck in the matrix. Because here, the minute you become a corporate employee, the government now knows how much you're making because sends them all of your wage data for tax purposes.
Hmm.
You get all of your benefits through the corporation. The sad thing is, I'll give you a real world example. I have a friend who had a very, very good high paying job, corporate job, but he had a very good high paying job, took care of his family, was able to use some of the income from that job, invested it in a fast food franchise.
Hmm.
But because he couldn't staff that fast food franchise, he had to quit his high paying job
Go work.
to run his small business on a daily basis on his own. He was there making food, delivering food, doing all of this to try to save his investment. That kind of thing should not happen. There's no reason why, because here again, instead of having policies that get government out of our way, give people the ability to fail or succeed on their own merits. We create all of these barriers to entry, barriers to growth, all of these regulations, all of this government oversight, all of this taxation, and it is carefully calculated to adversely affect small businesses while not affecting these large corporations, all of the regulations that create these monopolies. Why is it it's so hard for small businesses, for startups to survive the first 5 years? Because they can't afford to meet all of the regulatory requirements that the state and federal government place on them,
Yeah.
because those regulatory requirements were designed by the corporate competition. They know they can afford to meet all these requirements, and they know that you and I starting out
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah.
And these are things that the average person either hasn't been informed of. And you're right, it's our education system. They took civics out of our schools because they want to dumb down the populace. They need the citizens to be as uninformed as possible. That's why in Indiana we still have straight ticket voting. Because, and I was talking to somebody last night about this, it's entirely too simple for somebody to watch reality TV all day long, and then on election day, they get up, they go to the polls, and they go, I don't want the Democrats, so I'm going to hit the Republican button. Or I don't want the Republicans, so they hit the Democrat button. They don't know who they're voting for. They don't know what these people stand for. They don't know what their voting record is if they're incumbents. All they know is they're voting for Republican or Democrat, which means we're not voting for people. We're voting for organized, and I'm going to say this, I hope I don't offend anybody.
Don't get me banned from
We're voting,
YouTube.
yeah, we're voting for organized crime
Yeah.
to run our lives.
No, I agree with you. I mean, and this is why I so appreciate having your time here today with us, because sometimes it feels like I'm speaking in a vacuum, and
Alone in my echo chamber.
yeah. So I appreciate you coming on and kind of substantiating, not kind of substantiating, you are, the things we talk about on this channel about freedom and liberty and, getting educated. Don't even leave it up to the school system, as bad as it is, to pick up a book, read, go seek out the information, go seek out truth, right? To your point, do not sit in front of the TV and watch another reality show that's just going to corrupt
Absolutely.
your brain. You're getting nothing from that, right? It's
Well,
up
you
to
know what Mark Twain said? I never let my schooling get in the way of my education.
That's right, right? That's
And
powerful.
that's such an important thing for us to realize, especially when we start talking about. I hate to use the term public education.
Mm,
I try to call it government education anytime I
mm,
can.
mm.
They're trying to peddle universal school choice in Indiana right now. And as a candidate for governor, I tell people I want universal school choice. What they're peddling now is that you should be able to send your child to any state accredited school you want to. My contention is if the state accredits it, it's all the same. They're living by the state regulations. They're doing what the state tells them to do. I want universal school choice where if you as a parent want to send your child to a privately accredited institution
Yeah,
or
should be
a
able to.
non-accredited institution, you still get the money
Yeah,
allocated for your student to pay for that education, whether the state likes it or not. Our state constitution says we have an obligation to fund common schools. Now, common schools is not specifically defined in our state constitution. So I can determine that common schools means any school that I want to send my child to, including homeschooling. And
yeah,
I think it is a travesty that homeschool parents will push back hard on the idea of funding homeschool children because they're like, we don't want the money because we don't want the strings. And that should be an indication to people. The government always extorts, and it's always, we'll give you this money, but it's quid pro quo. We give you the money, you've got
yeah,
to do what we say. And that's not, our government is not supposed to tell us what to do. We're supposed to be telling it.
yeah.
You know, Jefferson is attributed with the quote, when people fear the government, there is tyranny.
Mm,
When the government fears the people, there is liberty. I want liberty,
yeah.
not tyranny.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, this is all great stuff, and so I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be a little facetious here. It sounds like these are just problems happening in Indiana,
Oh, but they're not.
but they're not. See, that's the thing,
Right.
right? And so
This
that's
is everywhere.
right. So for the audience, for the listeners out there, please, this is not just a Indiana type, problem, problems that Don and I have been, kind of talking back and forth about here. These are problems that affect each and every state, each and every American out there, and
Yes,
more so if you have kids, because
absolutely.
it just gets exemplified when you kind of look down that road and say, what's it going to be like in 50 years? It can look and probably will look very different. So we need more folks like Don, in each and every state, sharing this message, sharing this education, this real education. Don is a real teacher, right? He's not out there peddling, his own magic dust. That's not what Don is doing. doing. He's a real teacher, educating people how things are working and what's going on out there. And so we need more Dons out there. Don, I know you're on a tight schedule, and I appreciate having your time here today so much. Any last thoughts, comments you want to share with the audience?
And I apologize, but I'm going to do the thing that, even, because I'm not a multimillionaire and can't fund my own campaign, and I am running for governor of the state of Indiana. If you'd like to learn more about my campaign, you can do so by going to rainwaterforindiana.com. And you'll see there information on my stance on a lot of different issues. You can also go to our contact page and sign up to volunteer to help, or get emails letting you know how the campaign is going. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that if you would like to donate to the campaign, I would be more than happy to take your contribution. I would be thrilled if you would contribute to the campaign. When I ran for governor in 2020, we got 11.4% of the vote, which was the highest percentage that a libertarian statewide candidate in a three-way race had ever gotten in Indiana. We got about 345,000 votes, and we raised about $450,000 to do that. And I've determined that we need about 1.4 million votes to win this election in November. And if I can raise $2 million, we can do that. So if you'd like to donate, we'd love to have you donate. If you'd like to just learn more, here again, you can just go to rainwaterforindiana.com. You can follow us on Facebook at Rainwater for Indiana.
Is
And
there on the website rainwaterforindiana.com, is there a link somewhere on there to donate?
there's a
Okay,
donate button on the
perfect.
top. And as a matter of fact, if you decide you'd rather send a check in the mail than donate online, if you click the donate button, it takes you to the electronic online donating page. But at the bottom, it has our address, which here again, you would make the check out to Rainwater for Indiana. And then the address is P.O. Box 451, Nineveh, 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 Indiana 46164.
And if you folks missed that, we're going to put that into the description field, the website, the address, all of that,
Awesome.
so that it's not forgotten. It's nice and easy. Don, thank you so much for being on with us today and sharing with us what you folks are going through specifically in Indiana. But it's not, solely in the state of Indiana. It's everywhere. So
Absolutely. And
we need to make it a bigger cause.
yes, and Tony, thank you so much for having me. And you're absolutely right. These are not just, I'm an Indiana guy running for Indiana governor, and I focus on Indiana issues, but these are issues that are affecting every liberty-loving person in the United States of America.
Yep, we all got to be tackling this together. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Appreciate having you on, Don. Thank you.
Thank you.